Okay, so we're starting with lesson 5 today of the Giver, but I want to just kind of go over a couple questions from yesterday. Describe Jonas's memory of Lily, and how did he feel prior to and during the ceremony? Jonas remembered the excitement, the conversations at home, wondering about her, how she would look, who she would be, how she would fit into her established family unit. And he became a 5 that year. So she became a 1 and he became a 5. So it's like they're 4 years apart, because she's going to become an 8 and he's going to become a 12 at this next ceremony. He remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side the year instead of with the other nurturers, since it was the year. And all of this is citing evidence. All of this that I'm taking, I'm just taking evidence straight from the text, everything that I'm saying. He remembered new child, 23, Lily. He liked his sister's name. That's page 16. And number 2, with the lines about, he realized that he was aware of the past year, even that increasing level of observations from the elders. And it's like, what do these lines reveal about Jonas's community? There's no privacy. It's no secret that the elders are up close and personally involved in everyone's lives. The elders have definitely increased their level of involvement this past year. It makes one wonder why. They're taking notes, but they're keeping very detailed records on everyone's life, and in all of the 11's life, especially in all areas of their life. So they're gathering information, so they're going to be making decisions for each individual. They're going to be making decisions based on watching someone in every area of their life after careful examination. I just want to remind you of the foreshadowing when the Father says, but to be honest, for me, there was not an element of suspense that there is with your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain of what my assignment would be. And I think that's kind of the way maybe others, there are those that are just drawn to certain things that they know they like to do, and it's not a huge surprise when they get a certain, like when they become 12, that they would be chosen to do that particular thing. Like the example that they gave with the engineer, that would be another example of evidence from the text to support that. Number 3, what do Jonas's questions about with his father, whenever he asked his father whether any of the 11's disappointed? He's not convinced, Jonas is not convinced that the elders really do know what's best for him. He wants so bad to be happy, and he's just a little bit nervous, and that's why, and that makes all the more sense, because now we understand why he's apprehensive. He knows that's coming. He knows that a decision is being made about his life, and he practically doesn't have any control over it. And he's got to make the best of it. And he's praying to God he likes. And his parents, their response is they're pretty confident. And a lot of times we go by on our parents' opinion. If our parents are confident about something than we are, if you know, if they say no, you're gonna be fine, or you don't need a jacket, then maybe we don't bring a jacket. No, I'm okay, I don't really need it. You know, we rely on our parents for guidance many times, which is a wonderful thing, and he's doing the same thing, and they are reassuring him that the elders know what they're doing. So they relay to him, you can, you know, they know what they're doing. They've been doing this a while. So, but that's, you know, you can trust. They're trying to get him to kind of relax, you know. We do also know that he's very concerned about his friend, because his friend seems to be kind of a goofball, just clump, you know, laughing, just not serious, you know, just, and like his father said, we all just enjoyed him, and he was just a life, just really energetic and just fun, and so it's going to be really interesting what his assignment's going to be, right? Okay, so with lesson 5, you were told for homework. I didn't say it in the video, but it's on the Google Classroom. You know, when you have homework, when you're told to read something for homework, I will not read the homework chapter, because I read what it tells me to read during the day. Like, but if it says read a whole chapter for homework, you're going to have to do that. And then when we come back, I'm going to do what we read during the class time. So today, it says that we're going to discuss an excerpt of chapter 3 of The Giver. And we're going to be defining words in context, and we're going to be making inferences about Jonas and his community based on Jonas's memory. So if you're in class, you will be sharing your summary. I do expect for your summary of your independent reading, like when you're told to read a chapter, that you take that 3-2-1 assignment and upload it, and it will be graded. 3 things about Jonas. We're going to go over that right now. So that was the assignment. 3 actions that Jonas takes or experiences that advances the plot. And we'll do this every time you have an assignment. If it's 2 chapters, you'll do it for each one, because each one kind of has its own. And then 2 things that you find interesting, and then 1 question you still have, and then you'll do like a little 5 or more sentence summary. So I will go over it also, but I will also expect you to have it done, because you're gonna be a better writer, and it's also gonna help you to understand where the story is moving when you break this down. So look at the actions that took place in the story. Well, as a summary, as far as Jonas, he looks at the new child's eyes when his father gets home and off the bicycle to realize he has blue eyes like Jonas. He pretends not to care about the new child and sits at his desk and does his homework. And then for my number 2, I say he remembers about a month ago when he was throwing an apple, and this again is a flashback, but he remembers when he was throwing an apple back and forth with Asher, and something happened to the apple 4 different times, but Asher never noticed it. And this one is really for this chapter. In chapter 3, this is a big deal. Something is taking place with this apple. And then number 3, he takes the apple home, thinking it may happen again, but it doesn't. The announcement to the 11s, which was actually directed at him, not to take anything from the recreation area. It embarrasses him to death. So, two things that I found interesting. Everybody in the community has dark eyes, but Jonas, a 5-year-old girl, a 5-year-old girl, and now this new child. See, before then, we hadn't been told anything about a description, really, about these people. And now we find out that all these people have dark eyes, which is fine. But, I'm thinking about, well, I actually haven't thought about it. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing that there's not a variety of color. And so everybody has dark eyes, but like at this point, 3 people, and that's very rare. So needless to say, Jonas stands out. And so does this new child, Gabe. And that I find that very interesting. Number 2, I said, the experience with the apple makes me wonder, what is the deal? Yeah. And then number 3, I went ahead and said, they're so strict. They notice every single thing. He doesn't mind going back and apologizing, for taking the apple because he wasn't supposed to leave. He was supposed to eat the food there. It was okay to have an apple, but you're not supposed to take the apple home. So he knew that that was wrong. He broke that rule. He went back and apologized. He was absolutely embarrassed, humiliated. He doesn't realize how strict of an environment that he's in. I see that. I find that interesting. And one question that I still have, and I'm like, what exactly did Jonas experience with that apple? I wonder why Jonas and the new child have blue eyes. How do they have blue eyes and everybody else not? What's that about? So that's my summary of when I did, because I'm going to be doing the work just as if I were you. I'm just, being honest with you. But I want you to do the work, and don't just do. I mean, I'll have it up here or whatever for you, but you do your own work too, and then I'm gonna give you credit for it, But let it be yours, not mine. Now, card 6 of 10, it says, everyone had known, he remembered with humiliation, that the announcement, attention, this is a reminder to male 11s, that objects are not to be removed from the recreation area and that snacks are to be eaten, not hoarded, had been specifically directed at him the day last month that he had taken an apple home. No one had mentioned it, not even his parents, because the public announcement had been sufficient to produce the appropriate remorse. He had, of course, disposed of the apple and made his apology to the recreation director the next morning before school. So what caused Jonas to feel humiliation? Why was he humiliated? Yeah, he was embarrassed. He got embarrassed. How do Jonas's feelings help you determine the meaning of the word remorse? No one had to mention it, not even his parents, because the public announcement had been sufficient to produce the appropriate remorse. So if you feel remorse, you wish that you hadn't have done that. That was a mistake. Why did I do that? You feel guilty, regret. I wished I wouldn't have done that. So it was appropriate. And the thing is, we know, as we, he done that because something was going on with that apple, and he was thinking, is this going to happen if I go home? Like, is what happening with this apple, is it still going to happen in a few minutes in the privacy of my own dwelling? And he was so curious. His curiosity about this apple overrid his don't take the apple home, you know. But nobody, he can't really explain that to anybody. So what ended up happening was he ended up, you know, getting in trouble for it. But if you look at the sentence all around, you'll see clearly that he did. I mean, it wasn't something that he could get away with. I mean, he took it from a public place, and it was definitely noticed. Okay. When an author interrupts an action to tell you about a memory, it's important to stop and ask yourself, why might this memory be important? I have been saying that from the get-go because that's so true. And the thing is, when you do read this book on your own, or even with me or whatever, constantly be questioning yourself, is this happening now? Or is this happening? Did this already happen? Is this a memory? Is this a flashback? Because if it's a flashback, it's for a reason. There's a reason this was told for the purpose of this story. So the answer might give you important clues about the theme or the conflict. Or it may foreshadow something that might happen later in the story, which is interesting how a flashback could actually foreshadow something. Does that make sense? I could give you a clue about the past by something happening, and it may actually give you, I could tell you something that happened in the past, and it may give you a clue about what could happen in the future. And we can connect dots as we go. Let's look at question 4. I'm going to start reading it. Jonas thought again about that incident. We're going to start reading there. Before we answer it. It's on page 29. Jonas thought again about that incident. He was still bewildered, not by the announcement or the necessary apology. Those were standard procedures, and he had deserved them. But by the incident itself, he probably should have brought up his feeling of bewilderment that very evening when the family unit had shared their feelings of the day, but he had not been able to sort out and put words to the source of his confusion, so he had let it pass. It had happened during the recreation period. When he had been playing with Asher, Jonas had casually picked up an apple from the basket where the snacks were kept, and he had thrown it to his friend Asher. He had thrown it to his friend, Asher had thrown it back, and they had begun a simple game of catch. There had been nothing special about it. It was an activity that he had performed countless times. Throw, catch, throw, catch. It was effortless for Jonas and even boring, though Asher enjoyed it. And playing catch was a required activity for Asher because it would improve his hand-eye coordination, which was not up to standards. But Jonas suddenly had noticed, following the path of the apple, through the air with his eyes that the piece of fruit had, well, that it was the part that he couldn't adequately understand. The apple had changed. Just for an instant, it had changed in midair. He remembered. Then it was in his hand, and he looked at it carefully, but it was the same apple. Unchanged. The same size and shape, a perfect sphere. The same nondescript shade, about the same shade as his own tunic. There was absolutely nothing remarkable about the apple. He had tossed it back and forth between his hands a few times, then thrown it again to Asher and again in the air. For an instant only, it had changed. It's just an instant. Now, it had happened 4 times. Jonas had blinked, looked around, and then tested his eyesight, squinting at the small print on the identification badge attached to his tunic. He read his name quite clearly. He could also clearly see Asher at the other end of the throwing area, and he had no problem catching the apple. Jonas had been completely mystified. Ash, he had called, does anything seem strange to you about the apple? Yes, Asher called back, laughing. It jumps out of my hands onto the ground. Asher had just dropped it once again. So Jonas laughed too, and with his laughter tried to ignore his uneasy conviction that something had happened. But he had taken the apple home against the recreation area rules. That evening, before his parents and Lily arrived at the dwelling, he had held it in his hands and looked at it carefully. It was slightly bruised now because Asher had dropped it several times, but there was nothing at all unusual about the apple. He had held a magnifying glass to it. He had tossed it several times across the room, watching, and then rolled it around and around on his desktop, waiting for the thing to happen again. But it hadn't. The only thing that happened was the announcement later that evening over the speaker, the announcement that had singled him out without using his name, that had caused both of his parents to glance meaningfully at his desk where the apple still lay. So what does Jonas notice about this apple? Well, And what is the meaning of the word mystified? What does Jonas feel? Why does he feel mystified? Why does he feel that? Okay, so y'all answer 4, 5, and 6. Okay, you'll do that on your own. And then, what does this memory reveal about Jonas's community? And what does it reveal about Jonas? That's the last question on the card. So just think about that, and I'll see you tomorrow.